Hello and welcome to the Promised Land, a show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min podcast network. I'm Scott Saunders, joined by Rob Blanchette, as ever, recording one day earlier than usual today because I apologise, but I'm going away on a short break in the next few days. But Rob, we're going to look ahead to the Brighton game on Saturday. Not a nice fixture, really, for United to have, given Brighton look half decent. And after United have been in not great form at the start of the season, but the international break is over, isn't it?
It is over, and we're back to the Premier League, and I'm kind of relieved in a way because doesn't it feel, Scott, obviously after the controversy at Manchester United since the Arsenal match and the way it's bubbled along, we just need some football. So, yes, we've got Brighton, and that's a big match for Ten Hag.
Yeah, Ten Hag will speak to the media. I'm sure he's going to have a lot of questions to answer on Friday, but we'll do our best here to talk about things before he does speak, because I think a lot of the things that he will say in that press conference might direct the direction of travel, to be honest, with a few matters. Injuries to some players, fitness of some players, availability or inclusion of some players in the squad, i.e. Jadon Sancho, we'll talk about again, unfortunately. We'll talk a bit of Evan Ferguson as well, as United have been talked up as identifying Evan Ferguson for a future transfer window. And he's relevant because he might be stepping out on the Old Trafford turf, although he was injured for Ireland over the last few fixtures. So I don't know his availability yet, but Brighton are turning up at Old Trafford as well. So we'll look ahead to that one as best we can and try and figure out what United are going to do in that game. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and watch us on YouTube, The Promise and a Manchester United podcast. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment for us as well. Pop the notification bell on so you don't miss a show. And follow us on social media at @Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok, at @Rob_B on X and YouTube, and at Promise and MU on X. I've said X loads of times. That is Twitter, but it's just changed its name. Now, where do you want to start, Rob?
You tell me, Scott, where do you want to start? Should we do Sancho again?
I think we might have to
get there and get past Sancho.
When did he take that post down? He took that post down after we recorded last, right?
He did, yes. And during that show, again, I tried to explain about why maybe the post was still there, what Manchester United were trying to do, what the outcome would be. And I think we all agreed, didn't we, both of us here, that the post would eventually be taken down. Because we do know that Jadon has been in New York City away on a short break. I'm sure he's not actually invested himself in the Twitter world and the storm that's going on. And he might not have thought, oh, maybe I need to take that tweet down. But that has now been communicated to him. And the tweet has gone. It's the only outcome, really, wasn't it? I don't think he owns his image rights, Scott, but he doesn't get carte blanche on what he does. So I'm sure that it was made in known certain circumstances that tweet had to go, and the tweet has now disappeared. And that's good because it means you can move on to the next step of process.
But are United moving on to the next step of the process? Suggestions from on Wednesday evening. Sorry, I'm getting my days mixed up because we usually record on Fridays. That John Murtagh and Richard Arnold are at the center of talks between Ten Hag and Sancho as the dispute is continuing. So, obviously, I think everybody knows what's happened here. I'm guessing you have. It's all anybody's really been talking about over the last few days. But Sancho not in the squad to face Arsenal. And I think we might understand a lot about how this is going to play out in the long term if Sancho is featuring in the squad, and like what kind of level of involvement he has in that game might indicate to us how buried this issue is if Ten Hag doesn't say anything publicly.
Yeah, I get the feeling that, we're obviously going out before the presser tomorrow for the game for Ten Hag going ahead of Brighton. And I think he's going to play this exactly how he plays everything, and that is with a straight bat. That's what he does. And I think he's just going to say, it's my prerogative to pick players, and that's my job. That's what I'll do. And I think that's all you're going to get. But what do we know behind the scenes? Like, you're right, Manchester United, as a body, as a business, are trying to broker some talks there to make sure that everyone is kind of happy that they can move forward. But I don't think here, Scott, that there's any real power dynamic issue. Like, the power lies with Erik ten Hag. He is the manager. He is backed by the board. No one player, even when we went back to Ronaldo not so long ago, is going to have more power than the manager when it comes to selection and what happens at a training ground. So we're aware that Jadon Sancho in his camp not particularly happy that his name was bandied about at the end of the transfer window. Again, promised all sorts of things by Manchester United over the last year or two, Scott, in terms of like wearing the number 7 shirt, being a big star at Man United. But yes, you've got to go prove it on a football pitch first, haven't you? That's really what it comes down to. Other things as well involving mental health, timekeeping, all sorts of things behind the scenes that maybe people think are not important, but really are when you're a manager of a football club. And Jadon Sancho has got stuff to prove now, hasn't he? And I think he knows that. I don't think he's stupid. I just don't think he likes maybe the way that some of the information is unfolded out in the press to particularly demonize the individual. But he has to go and play well on a football pitch. It's kind of as basic as that, Scott. And that's really the cure here. Otherwise, you will be leaving the football club.
Will he get on the football pitch is the actual question at the moment.
Not immediately, no, not immediately. But again, when we've talked about players on the peripheral at Man United or players that have been potentially banded to leave, let's talk about Harry Maguire in that context. Harry Maguire's been at the England camp, been strongly defended by his manager there for England because he obviously wants to get a performance out of Maguire, wants his support. We all agree Harry Maguire probably shouldn't be in the England team. But guess what? Now you've got injuries at centre-back. Guess what might happen for Erik ten Hag and Man United? So you don't really have a choice. You have to play certain players. If tomorrow, fingers crossed it doesn't happen, you lost Marcus Rashford and Garnacho to injury, you might well be considering starting Jadon Sancho again. That's just reality of football. I don't think Erik ten Hag is the kind of manager, Scott, that will cut his nose off to spite his face, to say, well, I've got this player, I'm not going to use him. I think what's more important in this moment is that you get Jadon to training, you find a method that motivates him, and you find a way to get form out of him. And that is it. There is no transfer window open to sell players.
Isn't that what Ten Hag's been trying to do for the last 15 months?
I think Ten Hag has been trying to do that with a whole clutch of players, Scott, that's still at the club. So whose fault is that? It's not Erik ten Hag's fault, is it? Again, we can have the conversation today about someone like Scott McTominay doing really well at international level. A player who has got a market for him, plays, he was wanted by clubs, and he might even start or feature against Brighton, as we're going to speak about today. Does Erik ten Hag want that player? No, he basically said he could go. So I think there are players like that, and that does create a certain amount of short-term disharmony. But again, I think the manager's got that right. I really do. I think he is the person responsible for all of that. And, you look at players that are not wanted, the only thing you can say to them, Scott, is to leave the door ajar a little bit and say, well, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, I don't want you either. But if you play well for me, you'll get picked. And if you play really well, maybe I'll keep you. Maybe then I'll change my mind. Maybe then I'll give you a new contract. Guess what happened with Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Scott? So it's as basic as that. And I think with Jadon, he's a bigger name, but it's not going to get any privilege for that. And he shouldn't do, in the same way that Marcus shouldn't do. Marcus found out when he was late for a training session or for a meeting that he got punished. And that's the right way to do it. Be consistent with everyone in that kind of tone. So we'll see with Jadon. He will get chances, Scott, just because of injuries at some point. Or if he does train better and if he does show a different kind of attitude, I've got no doubt that Erik ten Hag is the kind of manager that will say, right, I'll give you a chance, because we've seen it.
Well, I think that's the important thing. He needs to show that he is doing what the manager wants from him. You said there, he will get his chances. Erik ten Hag has made one of the big things he's talked about is discipline, principles, and all of this, and basics, and having to do all of those things since his arrival. And United need that. They need standards. If you don't meet those standards, you don't get in the team. Simple as that, really.
Let's do another comparison. We talked about Pep in the past. Pep and Cancelo. Cancelo, probably City's best player over a period of time, did really well for City. Nose got knocked out of joint, fell out with the manager. Guess what happened? That's it. Goodbye, Cancelo. You're off. So that is really, I think that's how football clubs generally work with good management. I actually believe in Ten Hag. The people I don't believe in, Scott, are the people above Ten Hag. That's the people I would criticise here, is that, the chief exec and your director of football need to have maybe some more groundswell influence there to be able to support the manager. And yeah, like you just said there, Ten Hag went to the board and said, I don't want these players, get rid of them for me, clear them out, we'll buy some new ones. And they went, okay, Eric. And they didn't. That's not on Ten Hag, that's on the board. That's not even on the players. I don't blame the players for that. Like, they can only do what they can do. But yeah, Jadon, he needs to get to a training ground. He needs to show the manager that he can be a valid part of the squad. And I always think with football, we see it so often that things do change in a blink of an eye with a goal or an assist or just a one good performance. Suddenly people are smiling again, Scott. So Jadon said in that tweet he wants to play football with a smile on his face. Well, do you know what, Jadon? Go do it. Get a smile on your face, listen to your manager, do what you got to do, get on a football pitch, and for 90 minutes, prove it. But during the week, you got to prove it as well when you're up against your other competition. An ex-pro once said to me, your biggest competition each week is not the team you face on a Saturday. It is the guy who plays your position in training. And that's the truth. And Jadon maybe needs to hold on to that a little bit more, because he's third choice on the left, isn't he? At the worst. But he's not going to get in the team unless he shows a better attitude and shows that he can score goals, get assists for Man United.
Yeah, I think that's it, really. So we'll see what Erik ten Hag says in his post-match presser ahead of the Brighton game, which is on Friday, over 24 hours since we record this, or from when we record this. But let us know if you think Sancho should be put back in the team, if anything needs to change, in the comment section on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed on YouTube already, listening on audio, please do. Or if you haven't subscribed on audio, please do. And you're watching on YouTube, please do that. But this one is not fixed yet. And to me, I think it's just about Erik ten Hag expects standards to be met. And if you're not meeting them, So I think something has to change on Jadon's side personally. So we will wait and see to see if some resolution is found. It's apparently not yet. Anyway, let's look ahead to Saturday's game. Brighton. I know you want to talk about Evan Ferguson. He's doubtful for the game because he was forced to withdraw from the Ireland squad over the recent international break. And a sore knee is what he's had. They have other options, Brighton, in that department. Not to say Ferguson he might feature. Maybe he just needed those extra few days. But would you like to see him eventually in a Man United shirt?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because again, young player, a lot of hype. Do you need him? Can you develop him? Do you go get him before his transfer value spirals? Well, his transfer value already spiraled. So that has gone. Exactly. So when you maybe had the opportunity when he was a less of a entity in terms of people's minds in football, you had an opportunity maybe to go do that. That's not really the case. I think he's going to have quite a big season, isn't he? Will he feature? Won't he feature? We don't know. Like you said, he did get that knock. I think the Telegraph have gone with the fact that they believe that he is available. So he will. I think he'll potentially feature. He might be on the bench. Who knows? We'll see. But I do think that, again, with player profile, I think maybe this is where some of this is a stab in the dark. Same with Højlund, is that you are looking at towards potential. How do you build your football club in the years ahead? And how do you look long-term, even beyond Erik ten Hag? Like, Erik ten Hag doesn't do well, Scott. Guess what happens? You'll get sacked. It's just the truth. So can you bring a set of players in that really want to kind of die for the badge? Well, we know that Højlund's a big Man United fan, and guess what? We know Evan Ferguson absolutely loves Man United and is a big Man United fan. So there is that side of it. I think the bigger thing is he the right profile of player that you should go for? And that's the discussion. Man United could go to the Osimhen market or go down that route, but it does seem that Man United don't have any money. Like we see that's not there, but we still don't know what is going on with the ownership. Now, we do feel that maybe the Glazers are going to stick around a lot longer than people are comfortable with. Does it mean Man United will still buy players? Well, yes, they will. But I think, again, when you look at the players that they have been signing, there is this imbalance, isn't there, between maybe some of the quality and some of the money that you're actually outlaying. Do you go for a player like Evan Ferguson at this moment, Scott? Is he the kind of player that maybe you move for in January or even in the summer? And do you go for a player like that? What do you actually think?
really hard. I think it's really dependent on how well Højlund does this year, because obviously I think Højlund's slightly older than Ferguson is, but he's obviously, they're in the same, like we reported on 90 Min over the summer, the United did want 2 strikers, and Evan Ferguson and Rasmus Højlund were in a list of young development options, and they also wanted a player like Harry Kane or Osimhen who was ready, and Højlund would be the kind of supplementary option who could learn from the senior option. Harry Kane is gone. Osimhen maybe signs a new contract with Napoli and has a release clause in his deal by next summer, and he is more affordable than he was this year. We'll wait and see. But yeah, Højlund is, well, we've only seen 20 odd minutes of him in the United shirt, but I think people are optimistic that he might be able to start hitting the ground running and start scoring some goals and offer something different in that department. But United do need, they do need another striker. Anthony Martial, I think this has to be his last season. Surely has to be his last season. He's out of contract at the end of this season with an option to extend, I believe. But it really depends on how well Højlund does, because if he scores 20 goals this season, are United going to want to sign another player of the same age for 100 million plus in Evan Ferguson and dovetail them? Because theoretically, if you got a striker who can get that many goals, do you need another massively expensive player in that position, or can you put it off and wait?
Yeah, totally. Or can you play a different system where you can accommodate more goal scorers? So I think, like, again, I think we've moved away, haven't we? Because of stuff that's going on at Man United and way things have been, we kind of do forget that Man United do need 2 strikers. Like, it's so far down the priority list, even when we chat about things and we plan shows and we talk about what's happening in the moment at Man United. You just kind of forget, don't you? You go, you don't talk about, do United need a second striker? Well, they need a first striker, first of all, don't they? That's what they really need. So they've now got that. I think that, there's no doubt Højlund, I think, is going to be given that opportunity to play games, score goals, and be the guy. But it does not mean that Man United can just close that market off. Now, if you do what Man City have done, you went and got your primary player in Haaland, and what did you do? You supplemented him with an Alvarez. That's the right way to do it when you're healthy and clean and everything is good. And Manchester United are none of those things. So I still think that you need players that take you into the future, primary players who could be superstars. You find them early and you make them superstars. Whatever he does at Brighton this year, Scott, whether it's impressive or not, this is a player that only will become a superstar at a big club. It's just the truth. Like, even if Brighton do well and say hover around the top 4 or show great form this year, which they might well do. I'm a big advocate and admirer of Brighton. You only can go so far. You have to then make the leap. So where do you go after that? A lot of the top clubs have got their strikers in place. You might find there isn't a home for an Evan Ferguson, but could you do that at Man United? Have a young striker, bring him in and work him into the team. You said dovetailing. I don't know if it's even as basic as that. It's just about like finding the system that works around it. Or are you just going to stick with 4-2-3-1 forever with one striker, and then you are probably stuck with a Martial because it's just supplementation from the bench, isn't it? So I would like to see Evan Ferguson at Man United. It's going to cost you money. There's no doubt about it. He's already at that level. He scored a hat-trick the other weekend, and people were like, oh, this guy, let's see him. Well, we know what he is. He's got a great rounded game. There's bits of Rooney about him. He's a bit of a leader. He's a bit of a bull in a china shop when he needs to be. But you know what? He's technically very well versed. He gets the game up here. And he's kind of perfect for Brighton. Like, it's scary because Brighton could do with a striker, I think, from last season and the season before. He's the guy. They've profiled him really well. And I think he's going to do really well for Brighton this year. And I really hope he's injured for Saturday.
Don't wish bad on, you know what I mean? Don't wish poor.
I really hope he's injured Saturday. I don't want to see him. I don't want to get to Old Trafford, Scott, and get the team sheet and go, oh, God, we have to deal with this today. I don't want to do that. I always say that. We always go, oh, I want to watch good players. I do. I definitely want to see good players, but I don't want to watch players that can, put a dagger in your heart, especially when you're already down over someone's tweets over a week. Do you get what I mean? So Evan Ferguson, definitely, I think, whether he comes to Man United or not, he is going to be a top striker. I really do. I can see him going the Bellingham route. Like when Bellingham came to us and we could have had him for 19 million and everyone, no, don't get Bellingham for Ole because he'll sit on the bench and all of that. United shouldn't spend that money. Well, 2 years later, Bellingham is rocking it in Madrid and showing everyone how good he is. I'm not saying Evan Ferguson will be exactly that, but I wouldn't be surprised in 2-3 years' time that Evan Ferguson is one of the best strikers in the world. And we're going, oh, he loved United. You could have got him, even if it was 50
But
million.
has that already passed like that?
Yeah, because sorry, go on.
I was going to say, has that moment already passed? Because he signed a new contract with Brighton early in the summer, which effectively ruled him out of moving from Brighton.
Yeah.
And they just sold Moises Caicedo for 115 million. Evan Ferguson is a striker. If he starts scoring goals in the Premier League as a teenager, he's going to cost 150 million quid.
And that is the problem, because time is already not on your side. You didn't go do that deal. You didn't think about doing that deal. But I also will stand by the fact that I think in the very, very near future, 100 million for a player will be nothing. That's just the way we're going. We're going that route where 100 million is going to be your standard 50 million. That's just what it isn't now. Football's gone mad, and it's controlled by the people upstairs in terms of the money, in terms of sponsorship, in terms of television. And that means that, yeah, someone like Caicedo ends up going for in excess of 100 million. As we said at Chelsea, if he say he struggles, Scott, in the next few weeks, people straight away will be on that and say this guy's got this big valuation that he came to the football club with. That's a problem. But again, if you're looking at strikers, Scott, you're either going to go bargain basement and look for players in that 10, 15, 20 million to supplement from the bench. And then guess what? If Højlund gets injured, you're playing a player that's just not probably up to standard, not good enough for you. You might have to pay a lot of money for Evan Ferguson. But I look at him and it is very Rooney-ish. Like when we bought Rooney, that was for 30 odd million. And in those days, 30 million was like loads of money, like crazy money for a teenager. Like, what are United doing for 30, 35 million? This is mad. And it was all because Newcastle triggered that, because they'd put a bid in that Everton had accepted. Here we are all these years later. I kind of see the parallels is that, yeah, you might have to pay something like 100 million, maybe get away with 80, 90. I don't know. What can you negotiate?
Don't think that's happening.
Well, can you get a player to fight his way out of a club? Because again, Caicedo, I think, had conceded defeat and was going to stay at Brighton. And then Chelsea had to put that huge bid in to kind of broker it. If Caicedo had his way 6 months before, Scott, he'd have been at Arsenal. So, if you can't force your way out for whatever reason because of contracts, that's where you are. We don't know if there's any break clause in Ferguson's deal. We just don't know that. We don't know if there's anything in there contractually that would allow him to go negotiate elsewhere at a certain value. But you're right, 100 million is going to be it's like the going rate now, isn't it? And I think in the next few transfer windows, people are going to be shocked. Remember when Neymar went for 200 million? Yeah. It's going to be nothing anymore in the future. People are going to pay that price because, especially now with the Saudi money in football, we're going to see that this explosion in valuations. And I don't think you can get away from that. You're not going to be able to play the game at the 20 million market like it's, Championship manager from 2006. Like those days have gone, and you're going to have to keep up with the Joneses by paying the top wages and the top fees. Man United tend to do that anyway with players that they really want, but it's difficult, isn't it, when you've actually got no money and you're having to broker stuff in a different way.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe Evan Ferguson plays at Old Trafford this weekend. We will see. Rob does not want him to. I
really hope not.
You'll be there, right? Will you be there?
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there. And it'll probably be Danny Welbeck starting, and Danny Welbeck will score in front of Stretford, and we'll go. I'm not trying to be a downer on it, but I really do rate Brighton. Like, I think we've had this conversation. You're not a big fan of Brighton, are you? Or you weren't a big fan of Brighton? You're a little bit.
I like Brighton. I see shouts like, and I rate Roberto De Zerbi as a manager, but I saw Jamie Redknapp go on Sky. I think it was before the West Ham game, which they lost at home, saying, "Oh, De Zerbi could be one of the best managers of all time." And I was like, "Hold your horses a little bit." Like, I've copped a lot of flack for this actually, but Brighton are so well run and have things planned from the very top perfectly. They have this scouting network absolutely nailed on. I've had it nailed on for a number of years now, and they're starting to reap the benefits of it. So any manager going into Brighton has the perfect conditions to succeed. They don't have any expectation on them. So it's easier to succeed in relevance to what Brighton's expectations are. So I think I really like Brighton. I really rate them. I think they're a breath of fresh air, this kind of thing. But when it's easier, is all I'll say. It's easier for a manager to go in there and succeed.
100%. Totally. And that's why, like Brighton are like, again, we view Brighton as little Brighton, don't we, on the South Coast, who've come up and done well and have come from the fourth division, fourth tier, and have worked their way up there. And they've done all of that, and they absolutely deserve all the credit in the world. But Brighton are quite heavily well backed, have a very strong ownership structure, and they've pumped a lot of money into it behind the scenes, like you said there. Their director of football and their view of squad building, I think, is more modern. It's kind of closer aligned to your
how you should do it if you're a club of Brighton size.
And it's ironic, isn't it, that when you compare Brighton and say Manchester United are like your dusty old statue in the middle of an old school square where you were once, the most impressive thing there, and you're not really anymore. And you have to fight towards that and build towards a new structure, something cleaner and better, as I described it earlier. You look at Brighton, they are definitely the poster boys of all of that. And I think, when they're selling all these players at an incredible value, like I think they've sold something like £450 million worth of players in 12 months or something like that. That's astonishing. But yes, you tell about the De Zerbi part of it. It's a little bit like Bielsa at Leeds, is that when Bielsa was at Leeds and flavour of the month, Bielsa was the best manager in the world.
According to for me, there's more pressure at Leeds than Brighton.
Absolutely. Leeds are a bigger club. Definitely. Yeah. Leeds are a bigger club, and the expectations are bigger, and the pitfalls are bigger at Leeds than they are at Brighton. So if Brighton say it all went wrong tomorrow, Brighton would still have a ton of players that they could sell, which they would do, and they'd reinvest it into their squad. And Brighton are now no longer that team that you look at and go, like Wolves, you might be in the bottom 5 at some point and you might go down. You now look at Brighton as an aspiring club in the same way you might do with Brentford. You look at Brentford, and Brentford are a well-run machine. They have a manager that everyone kind of likes. They play a style of football that's quite entertaining, and they've worked through the levels to be where they are. They deserve to be where they are. Brighton, I think, are a very dangerous opponent for Man United in this moment, because Brighton have got some swagger and they've got some players who are really showing what they can do. But this is going to be difficult for Ten Hag. This is why I don't think Ten Hag in his presser is going to go really heavy on the whole Jadon thing, because he's got bigger problems. And his bigger problem is De Zerbi. And I do like De Zerbi ball, as they call it now. I really like the way he sets up. It's a brave style of football. And it's probably the most entertaining in Europe in isolation. Like, you watch them and you go, yeah, it's a team that wants to attack and wants to be aggressive and wants to threaten teams and show them that they're better than them. Don't think Man United are that kind of team at the moment. I really don't. I think still trying to work through an identity crisis, but little bit wary of what could happen on Saturday, because I think United need to be not foolish, Scott. Like, don't go there and say, well, we're Man United and you're nobody. Because I think if you do that, might get punished for that. And if you think too much about whether Jadon Sancho should start or shouldn't start, or should be at training or shouldn't be at training, it's very easy to just let someone like McTominay then just dance all over you, and suddenly the headlines are written for you on Sunday morning already.
Yeah, that's the thing with Brighton. I mean, I use this example as well of, how much the pressure is off, because they can afford to pluck a player like Mitoma through their scouting network out of nowhere, really.
Yeah.
And they can afford to take a chance on Moises Caicedo for $4 million and put him in the first team, because there's not a lot of pressure on you. I personally would like United to do more of that personally, but United probably think within their sphere that it's too much pressure for these kinds of players who are they could really, really fail. But Brighton create these conditions for these players to, because of the lack of pressure, because of the lack of expectation, they create the conditions for these players to go out there and express themselves and succeed. And that allows them to play with, a freedom. Yeah. And if they lose, and believe me, they have taken some smash-ins. They've lost heavily a number of times. West Ham did an absolute number on them earlier this season. Nobody said anything.
Yeah, everyone went,
People forget.
That's all right. Yeah, that's okay. I remember you spoke about it and you were like, oh, look, Brighton got done. Then the next week, Brighton played well again. But you're right. There's absolutely no pressure. Not no pressure to win games, but no pressure if it goes wrong one week. Like, that's totally different to someone like Man United. The Caicedo I think is a really, really good example. £4 million on the market. Manchester United inquired, decided that he wasn't ready, wasn't the right profile. kind of, I said at the time, I said, go buy Casado, because for £4 million, like what can you get for
Totally,
4 million?
agreed.
You literally you couldn't mend the roof at Old Trafford for £4 million. So like, you're going to go get a player who that you can develop. And I'm all about, youth and developing it if you can do it. And I think when you look at Casado, the fact that he did so well at Brighton was, again, more about Brighton's robust system rather than just the player in isolation. Like, had Casado come to Man United, would he have got those opportunities? No chance. Just mentioned Jude Bellingham.
Bellingham thing, yeah.
Exactly. 19 million, up at Carrington twice. United saying, we want you. Everyone at Birmingham telling Man United, in terms of the scouting side, go buy this player, like he is amazing. And United could have done it, and they couldn't get their heads around it. The only team that could were Dortmund, because Dortmund said to him, come to us, we'll put you in our first team. Dortmund as well, really good example of a team that has a pressure, but because Bayern Munich do everything in the Bundesliga, then if you come second one year, everyone goes, oh, well, you're second anyway. If you come sixth one year, people go, oh, that's a bit bad. Sack your manager, we'll get another one. But it's not the same, is it? The Jadon Sancho thing again with Man United. Jadon Sancho's tweet will generate more aggravation and press column inches than a bad performance by Brighton. And that's the universe we live in. And that is kind of like, Brighton will come to Man United on Saturday just a bit fresh after international break. They'll have worked on what they work on, and they'll come and play their game. And they have that freedom of expression, Scott, that maybe Man United don't have. And again, I think fans want United to be like that. But my God, it's a long journey. It's a really long journey to get to where you can play with that kind of freedom, when you know that if you mislay a pass, there's going to be a billion tweets about it. And people will be saying you're a bad person and we hate you. And that just doesn't happen at Brighton. Everyone loves Brighton. I love Brighton. I really do. If they weren't playing my team on Saturday, I'd be like, yeah, I'd quite like to see Brighton in the flesh at the moment, because I really do appreciate that style of football, and I like what they do, and I like how they move through the gears. It's exciting to watch. It won't be exciting to watch as a United fan at Old Trafford as they hit you on the counter, or they counter press you, and maybe you've got Harry Maguire starting because Martinez may be injured. There's all these other factors, isn't there? But yeah, I like Brighton, and I like Ferguson, and I do think that eventually he might be the kind of player, Scott, going back to that. That is the kind of play that you want, in terms of taking your long-term project forward.
That's definitely the sign. And if Alex Ferguson was still here, he's definitely the kind of player that United would just sweep up with all that they could.
They'd have bought him already.
Yeah, they already
would have been done this summer. Yeah. They would have, even with that contract being signed, they'd have gone, who cares about contracts? Like, we'll just buy it out. Because that's what big clubs generally do. You don't get a contract that stops you doing it. You just go do it. But I think, again, we know there's other things going on at Man United that do stop a lot of that stuff.
Evan Ferguson likes and supports Man United. Maybe he will not want to score against them.
Maybe exactly. Maybe he'll have a tap in and he'll go, oh no. I remember.
That's getting into some kind of dark realm that we should not be discussing.
That Roy Keane shirt that I had and all of that. And, I just can't possibly, put the knife in a Man United when they've had such a bad week about Jadon Sancho's tweet. So, yeah. But I actually think we might see him. I think he might be on the bench. And I think he has that knock. And I think Welbeck will probably start. But, again, 20 minutes of Ferguson might be frightening, isn't it, at the end of the game?
How do they beat them then? Because Brighton, they do give up chances. They do give up space if you can crack them. West Ham did it beautifully a few weeks ago. And I think they had 20% possession. I don't think Old Trafford would tolerate that, as much as that might be the best way to beat them.
Well, we have seen that before at Old Trafford.
Well, that's true.
20% possession.
How do they beat them then? Is there any particular players that are key to winning this?
Look, it's the obvious protagonist, isn't it? We talk about them every week, but I do think that you're now having to find a way to enable Højlund. You have to start doing things in games that to us look visually that you're now going to play through a 9.
Let's just on that. So Højlund obviously got 20 minutes at Arsenal, 25 minutes at Arsenal. Yeah. He then had 2 sub appearances. I think he had 45 minutes for Denmark in the most recent fixture they played. Do you think he starts?
Yes, I think he starts. And I think he starts unless Martial has trained really well in the last 7 days Scott's putting his thumbs up there as soon as I mentioned the M word there, Martial. So that's for people here who are not watching on YouTube and are just listening on audio. Yeah, look, we don't want to see Martial start, do we? But it's an option because the manager feels that Martial can still give him credible minutes. So you might see Martial for, say, 60 minutes and see Højlund off the bench. But I think, Scott, will see the flip. I think we'll see 60 minutes for Højlund and Martial filling in the second half minutes, because I think that's more of where you're going. Like with what you've got now and for the rest of the season, you're going to have to find a way where Højlund plays 70% of the minutes and Martial plays 30 or less. And I think Højlund's hungry. So like you said, I think it's quite good that he actually went on the international on duty.
Totally.
Because I think, again, he needed the minutes. He needs the minutes. He needs the training. It will be more intensive training in the internationals because that's kind of the way it goes to get ready for the matches. And also, good break to be away from Man United. He's been doing this for a few weeks now. You know, he's been at Carrington's getting his core fitness up. And I think he's kind of ready to start. I think we saw that at Arsenal, is that he doesn't look miles off. It wasn't in that 30 minutes, he wasn't huffing and chugging and like, oh, you know, not quite sure what I'm doing here. He looked quite motivated, understood the tactics. He's going to do the work there. And if you're playing someone like Brighton, Scott, you need a little bit of an X factor. You need to make Brighton think, oh, this is not the easiest day at the office. There's a guy here that we're not quite prepared for. So I think United will go for that in terms of the front line. Obviously, we know there'll be no Anthony now. So what do you do with that? I think that's a bigger side. How do you service Højlund? I think we'll see Bruno there on the right. Don't hate me, people, for saying that.
Do you think that we will this time just because of the injuries? Or Amrabat's obviously not played much football, so you don't really expect him to start straight away, or do we?
Right.
Like how many, if you take Bruno out of that midfield three, you have Eriksen in there, you have Casemiro plus who? Question for you.
Yeah, sorry. You went blank there in my ear.
Oh, did I? Okay,
yeah,
sorry. Plus who? If Bruno plays right, who fits in that midfield?
I think the thing is, it's who fits that midfield is whoever you've kind of got for Man United at the moment. But tactically speaking, I think if you've got Højlund up top, which let's say we assume that, is he needs service. So messing around with your other positions, like say maybe Rashford right, Garnacho left, which I think we'll see a lot of in the weeks ahead if Anthony is still absent. I think in this game, Bruno showed, especially for internationals here, that he's quite adept on the right and he can serve as a striker. So then you say, well, what do you do in the midfield? So yes, I think it would be unwise to start Amrabat when he's had an injury. But what we are hearing on the grapevine is that he might actually be ready to start. So he's come back to United. They've assessed him and there's confidence that he might be able to play minutes or at least make his debut in some capacity. So, Scott, as you build week by week by week, that is your solution. That's how you probably do that in terms of mixing and matching, because it's going to be Casemiro and Amrabat holding the fort, isn't it, while you try and sort out all the forward positions. Will they do it against Brighton? I'm not sure, because I think if Amrabat's not up to speed and he goes against Brighton's quick defense, he might look really bad on the day. He might really struggle against that transition in the Premier League. He's never played Premier League football. Like it's always a shock to the system. And what would be the worst thing that could happen there, Scott, is that you throw him in for 90 minutes and he gets destroyed. And if that happens, guess what happens? You know, we all write about it, don't we? So that's the way it goes. So I think that Ten Hag will be a little bit more cautious. I don't know. I don't think Amrabat will start, but I don't think that means that Bruno doesn't play on the right. Let's talk about Scott McTominay. Let's just interject this because he's on form. Do you think, Scott, that Scott McTominay should start against Brighton or at least feature?
Well, it's not impossible, is it?
No.
I mean, it really depends on the fitness of other players. But I do think that if Amrabat isn't ready to start, you could probably use Scott McTominay's energy in this game. You really could, for me.
If you're going to go 4-1-4-1, which United like to do at home quite often when they morph into that shape, I would not be surprised to see Scott McTominay as one of the eights. Just would not be surprised. Because if you're going to play further up the pitch in transition, you're going to go up that way, McTominay can kind of do that. What McTominay is not good at is playing any kind of double pivot in this system. He's not a number 6. He's not going to look after... He's not going to look after Casemiro in a way that maybe Casemiro needs that help. Or I think he tries, but I just don't think he's got the technicality. But he's playing well for Scotland. And there is a groundswell. As United fans are saying, why can you not fit this player in? I think there is a chance that he might get a go if Amrabat is not quite ready, or say you need to use Bruno in a different position. Do you use Scott McTominay behind a striker, not as a traditional number 10, but someone who in the maybe 4-4-2 shape can support a striker and get in the box? So that's what Scott McTominay is. You said it so many times. Scott McTominay has been misprofiled so many times by, I think, United fans as much as anyone. And he's showing it in Scotland. Was it 6 goals out of 7 from
Something
that
like
position? So it is different in national football. Like, I'm not going to compare the two, but he shows he can play the position. That's my point. It's just that you have to make all the other bits work. Rashford on the left, for me, I think is just a no-brainer. Is that if you can start with Rashford on the left, then you have to just decide what you do on the right. And then the rest of it is like a little bit like stickle bricks. Like, you're trying to make it all come together as a formation, as a system. And yeah, I'm sorry, people. I think Bruno will be the guy that ends up wide because he's the one who can create from that position. Mason Mount, we've still not heard much of, have we? I don't actually believe he's back in training from what we've heard.
I think last thing I saw, really, and this might be wrong, but he was targeting the Bayern game to return to the squad. So I don't know, maybe
not far. So not far, but again, it would be a leap of faith to say to start him in anything in the next 1 or 2 games, wouldn't it? It's just work him back slowly. But then Mason Mount, I think, is a big part of this long term about how do you unlock Højlund, how do you get him to get opportunities? Because that's going to be the big thing now, Scott, right? As bad as some of Man United's play has been, if you can flick the switch here and get number 9 and with number 9 service, and say he scores, I don't know, say next 10 games he scores you 4 goals. Not a lot, 3-4 goals. It is a blueprint to build on for the rest of the season, is that you now got a striker that can do striker things. And United have just not had that for forever because Martial is a hybrid striker. He's not a real out-and-out 9. He just can play the system in a 4-3-3. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of questions. Not many answers, and Brighton is a really bad team to experiment against because they will completely rip through you. I'm a little bit more worried, Scott, I think, about Man United's defence against Brighton than I even was, say, at Arsenal. Because I think at Arsenal, you can mitigate stuff and sit deeper. As you said, at home, there will be this expectation to attack.
Yeah, let us know. Do you think United will manage to take the points in this one? It's a difficult one, but United do have some games coming up which you'd expect really United to start getting back on track in the league at least. I know they have Bayern Munich away in midweek next week, but then I think the run of games is, I looked at it recently and it's like you got to be taking 10, 12 points out of these next coming up games. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. Brighton play United on Saturday. And Rob will be there. I will be away, but we'll be back next week. Maybe our days will be a little bit mixed up as I'm away, and I don't know exactly when I'll be able to record, but we'll try our best. And Rob, I think that's it for us today because I've got to shoot off. But subscribe wherever you get your podcast and watch us on YouTube as well. Promised Land, Manchester United podcast. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a video. And follow us on social media at @_ Scott Saunders, at _ Rob _ B on X and YouTube as well. Subscribe to Rob's channel and at Promise and MU on Twitter or X as well. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everyone, for listening and or watching. We'll see you soon, everyone. Let's hope United get 3 points, even though they'll be pretty difficult to come by, you'd imagine. See you soon. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.